Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Today we have a panel of four brilliant women talking about something that's very close to my heart, something that honestly we have been talking about for far too long and really shouldn't still be talking about, but here we are. And that is about the challenges and the pay gap that we still have for women in business. And to kick it off, I can introduce you to Nicola, who is the editorial director at Creative Brief, and she's going to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We were talking before about what the ratio of men to women would be in this room, and it's really positive. So that's a great thing to start with. But closing the gap. So the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2022 says if we carry on at the rate we're going now, we're going to have to wait 132 years until we reach gender parity. So I'm really grateful to have a panel that is not prepared to wait that long at all. So you'll notice that we don't have Anna Whitehouse with us in person. We will have a video from her, so we're going to have a couple of snippets from her, which is great. And she's obviously successfully run the powerful Flex Appeal campaign, which fights for flexible working for everyone. She's a radio presenter at Global Radio, and she's completely relentless and creative in her pursuit of progress. So we're super grateful she can join us virtually. And then next to me, I've got the amazing Tajali Shait, and she's creative director and founder. She's a senior art director at Prime Video and Amazon Studios. She also achieved the impossible of starting a new business in the pandemic, which I just think is phenomenal, and we're so lucky to be joined by her. And her Roll agency, it really helped and continues to help small businesses that were hit hard by the pandemic. And then next to her, we've got the incredible Sue Higgs. And Sue is Executive Creative Director at Dentsu Creative. And I can think of so many things to say about Sue, but when I was LinkedIn stalking, I love a LinkedIn stalk, I found this perfect description of Sue from a creative duo she once managed, and it says, Sue inspires, she builds you up, she makes you better, she makes you try harder, she makes you want to be the best creative you can be, and she does this while wearing leopard print and making you laugh like you never laughed before. And she is actually wearing leopard print, so I was really happy to see that. And then last but not least, I've got the brilliant Molly Tappin, and she's Associate Creative Director at Jungle Creations, the online media house which specializes in social content creation and distribution. And she's been described by former colleagues on LinkedIn, again, having a cheeky stalk, as being an outstanding and inspirational manager who takes a huge interest in the career progression of her team. And I think everyone's going to talk about very different points of view today, but ultimately, these are all women that are building bridges across the gap, so there's lots to learn from them. So the first theme we're going to talk about is really personal experiences. To kick off, we're going to hear just a little bit from Anna in this pre-record. Hopefully. I'd love to hear about your own personal experience of gender discrimination and what really drives you to push to close that gap.
Well, I think everybody within any kind of activist space probably questions, am I the person to pipe up about this? And do you know what? I stopped overthinking it because actually what it came down to was, can I raise my daughters for the same fall that I had? And the answer was no. So it came from a very primal, maternal, visceral place that I cannot and will not raise them to work hard in their ABCs, you know, their GCSEs, their A-levels, perhaps go to university, perhaps get their first job, have some kind of career trajectory to have somebody in position going, as soon as, let's say, sperm hits ovary, you cannot continue. And so it was actually beyond my own personal story. It is about the story, the future story of the next generation. All we want is to build back differently, actually. I'm not interested in the capitalist better. I'm interested in differently. And I think that's been the learning, is actually that I say, why did I raise my voice? It was for a very primal reason. But actually, everybody listening right now has a relevant voice in this discussion. So you ask what's going to change things culturally, it's you. It's me. It's not waiting for the government to change legislation. There are a lot of us in this fight. Is the fact that the current working world, the 9 to 5, was set up in the Industrial Revolution when men went out and got the bacon and women cooked it. That is not the case anymore. And we need culturally, legislatively, to break it down, rebuild it differently, not necessarily just better. But I do also realize in those moments of vulnerability, pregnancy, menopause being there, that also you might need support and you might not have the fight in you. And I would suggest ringing the Working Families Free Legal Helpline. I think there are two sides to this coin. If you've got the fight in you, raise your voice. If you are broken, like I was when I got pushed out of the workforce, I think seek the support you can for yourself, because in fighting that battle for yourself, you're paving the way for others, other mothers, other parents behind you. It is fact in front of any CEO driving their business forward. Lord Sugar, I'm talking to you about inclusion. Are you including not just women, but those who are disabled, those who have perhaps a mother with Alzheimer's who just needs to have a cottage pie on a Wednesday, and that keeps her week anchored, and you are working with someone who is a primary carer of that woman? Look at the nuance, look at the detail. Don't go, well, this is what we do for parents, this is what we do for the mummies, this is what we do for those who are disabled. No, stop with that, break it down, and actually say, how can we include everyone? From accessibility to the office, if you have a wheelchair, from parental leave, from making sure that parental leave is equal. It's not just weighed on female shoulders. Flexibility for everyone. Stop pegging it to female shoulders, because by doing that, you are again just excluding talent, because there are Gen Zers who are not willing to do this 9 to 5 slog. So you're losing out however you look at it. So I think it's more about inclusion than flexibility and talent almost. My daughter, who I'm, let's say, raising, I'm building up, telling her she can do anything, be anyone. Do I want somebody like me to be in a position to squash her at the most vulnerable point of her life? And I think in terms of allyship, let's be honest about biology, why we don't recognize these key biological junctures that happen to women that don't happen to men. This isn't a man-bashing exercise. It is a simple statement of Mother Nature fact that women, hormonally going through pregnancy, it's going to have more of an impact on them and their presence within the office, because raising a human, quite simply physically growing a human, is an extraordinary task. That is not to exempt men from stepping up to the plate and supporting, but I think businesses need to have full recognition and understanding. I'm doing a panel for Tommy's next week with key MPs and stakeholders in the miscarriage conversation. So understanding that when a woman, and I was that woman, I was miscarrying at my desk for fear of telling my employer that I was miscarrying, because I thought, God, they're going to know I'm trying, which might mean it will impact my promotion or my career progression. Because say if I can't get pregnant and then they know I'm trying, and so I'm red flag across my head. And I think it's that recognition that no woman should be sitting at her desk bleeding, losing a baby, for fear of her career being stunted. That is the most sort of brutal example I can give, and I'm not alone in saying that. So, these things happen to women, and I think we need EQ. Accenture lead with EQ now, as well as IQ when they recruit managers. I think the key conversation here is a recognition of biology and emotional intelligence. And this isn't some pandering snowflake conversation. You know, I think that's what, those are words that are often used to dismiss the very real need to recognize that Mother Nature's biggest task is ultimately raising a child, having a child, raising a child, losing a child, and then losing your ability to have a child. They are things that happen to women and don't happen to men. And I think EQ needs to be at the heart of that. And I think managers need to recognize that they can lead on a case-by-case, individual basis, because no one person's, not just women's, experience is going to be the same as the next. And it's down to them to communicate that to the team in a way that feels right culturally for that team. But at the moment, as it stands, it's just, oh, well, we can't give flexibility to you because it will open the floodgates to everyone.
And building on that, in fact, that no experience of the workplace is the same. I think there's this sort of idea that this is a woman's problem, and that the kind of personal experience element. Molly, I'd love to get your view, because we're having this conversation in the wake of the pandemic, and that has really brought with it a huge rollback in gender equality. And in many ways, the talent pipeline for the creative industries when it comes to women, it's not just leaky in parts, it's a real sinking ship. And you made some wonderful points when we talked previously about retention and this conversation really being for everyone. Could you tell us where you're approaching this topic from?
Yeah, definitely. I think we spoke about this previously, that we're really good as an industry, and you know, companies as a whole are really good at bringing in women and girls at those junior level, entry level positions. What we are really bad at is actually seeing that representation the higher you get up. So in senior leadership, on the board, in director positions. And it's on companies, it's also on senior staff at those companies to recognize that and then to make a change. So really make sure that we can see a new cycle. So we are focusing on the fact that women will not only remain in those positions, will attract women to those positions, and also we're going to focus on their growth so they can get to those positions. So yeah, big tick at the entry level, but especially in the wake of the pandemic, we've seen a real shift and therefore a dropout in those senior.
We really, just picking up on that, because I totally agree, we seem to do it really good, like you say, at recruitment level, see lovely, fresh faces, and then somewhere in the middle, everyone seems to get lost. And I think, again, many companies have got great policies around, you know, maternity starting to get slightly better, and, you know, like paternity even, which is a great sign moving forward. But then something happens in the middle, you know, something happens in the middle. So you see this huge kind of fallout of middle experienced women and men sometimes, and they don't get supported to go through to the next stages. So I think there's a really piece of work that needs to be done to understand why people aren't making it to the other end, because it gets a bit boring when you get, like I say, when you fight your way to the middle like me and you end up and there's actually just you. It's like I want to see other wonderful faces there with me as well. You know, there are some, but there needs to be a lot more, and I think we need to really understand why the whole of a kind of human's development isn't supported all the way through, because otherwise it's going to get, until the people who've had the experiences are in power, then they're not going to represent anyone coming through. So we're not going to be able to get people into those places, because they're just representing the same point of view all the time. So it's something I feel very passionately about, is creating an environment where everyone can thrive. Like Anna was saying, maybe it is, you have to be a lot more, take people on an individual basis. You have to listen to your people who you work with, what they need, and clear as much as you can out of the way in order to help them grow and thrive and stay the course, because otherwise it's going to get a bit boring.
And staying the course isn't always easy. And I think that's something we're really seeing now, actually, in the wake of the pandemic as well. And Tajali, you really shared the reality of having to sort of take a bit of a step back in your career after maternity leave, and your belief that as an industry, we're still really at starter level when it comes to equality. Could you tell us a bit about your experiences?
Yeah, of course. So when I was trying to re-enter the workforce in the UK, I was foreign, and I was foreign with a career gap, that is double whammy. So it was practically impossible to get even the attention of the hiring managers until I had to go back into the wonderful Creative Comeback program, and I got a placement. And a placement after having worked for 15 years in the industry again. I had to start an entire agency of my own to prove myself that I am worthy of working here and I can do it, which is after that I started getting job offers, but I still had to take like a few steps down in my career to get back into the workforce. But I think big part of the problem is this culture of you are only as good as your last piece of work. And for some of us who've been on a break, our last piece of work becomes dated. And there's this pressure where you have to constantly keep up and everything's changing really fast. And regardless of your circumstances, if you're not you're not at par with where the industry is going, you're just not good enough. And that can have an absolutely detrimental effect, especially on mothers who've been on a break or people who've been on caring breaks. Life just happens. So I think the industry, and of course, needless to say that once you're on a break, there's a huge confidence hit, right? So I feel like the industry needs to create environments which are welcoming and make it comfortable for people who've been on a break to get back into the workforce and still be able to perform while they come with this overwhelming guilt of not being there for your children and not being able to do great at work at the same time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done still for the returners especially.
And it's such an opportunity, right? With all the conversation around the talent crunch, gaps are gifts, and you've got all of this talent that's just not being utilized. And
absolutely,
I would argue sometimes that argument that the industry moves so quickly, so therefore you need to start from scratch after having a career break is really overdone. And Sue, I'd love to bring you in here because you really embody someone who has run your own race.
Yeah, I mean, I've done mine in spite of people, because if I listened to people, I'd probably be lying down in a ditch somewhere. You have to do it definitely in spite of people. I mean, luckily the world has changed. I've got 3 children, I'm a single mother, but it was easier for me when I had my children to not tell people I had children. So I'm pleased that we actually are allowed to talk about having children, which is a good start, because there was the kind of well, she's not going to take it seriously. She's going to be doing that baby stuff. When I had my first daughter, I worked at an agency that had never seen a creative had a baby, and I had to literally go in 7 months pregnant into the CEO's office and said, are you going to give me a maternity deal? Because if you're not, you're going to tell me to lose this child. So what are you going to do? And I had to write it down in paper then. So thank God, that wasn't that long ago. And that's the experience for a lot of female creatives. But luckily now, the world has changed a little bit more. But for me, at the time, I had to make myself quite quiet. I had to go realise what I could and I couldn't do. I think you have to be quite intuitive with yourself about how fast you can run the race, because you can't run. If you see your career career is a horrible word, but the amount of time you spend in the creative industries, you can't sprint the whole time, and you have to really be intuitive with yourself, what you can and you can't do, where your boundaries are. And it is all about boundaries. It's about what you're prepared to put up with, what you're not prepared to put up with, what is going to work for you, what's not going to work for you. And it's having a really good, at the time, it was not a conversation I could have with a boss, but hopefully it's a conversation someone can have with me now, because I know what it's like not to be able to have that conversation. So for me, I want to make as many people as comfortable to run their creative journey, the speed they want to run it, because it makes, fundamentally at the end of the day, we do quite a wonderful job. It's quite a charmed job, it's quite a privileged job. And the happier you are, the better your work is. The more supported you are, the more nurtured you are, the more you're believed in for who you are, the better work you'll get, because nobody wants anybody coming to work creating miserable work, because it benefits no one.
Just to add to that, I know you said earlier, obviously the industry has come on leaps and bounds, but I mean, I don't have kids myself, but a fear of mine has always been and continues to be, I was about to say a word I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, but
Swear.
Shit.
Swear.
Oh shit, if I do it.
Swear.
If I do have kids, I take that time off. Suddenly it's like, oh, I'm going to really fall behind because the industry moves so quickly, and what am I going to do? How can I get back into the role that I'm in? And we were talking about earlier is actually that fear shouldn't even exist, because yes, you will get there, and the industry might move a tiny bit, but not that much. And that's a real amazing thing to hear as someone who's thinking about that in the future, and it may be for some people here that actually don't live in that fear. Go and embrace it, and you'll still get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think the fear thing is worse than the actual reality of what it really is. It's just this thing that's perpetuated, isn't it, that something's really going to change. But it's what I call, I'm going for the S word again, shit FM. It's the shit FM that plays in people's heads that hold them back. And if there's any way you can find a volume in your head and turn that shit FM down, you can liberate yourself into being what you need to be in order to do what you need to. There's never a good time, ever a good time. That never happens.
Should have been the name of the panel.
Yeah, turn shit. I can't also, Emma Thompson said it first, I have to reveal my sources. But it was something that stuck with me. She knows what she's talking about.
But I think with that shit FM in mind, I think some of the narrative around maternity leave is really perpetuating that, right? Because it wasn't that long ago that you had John Hegarty in campaign saying, oh, there's not a glass ceiling, women are just going on maternity leave and the industry's moving on, which kind of proves the industry isn't moving on. I don't think you could get away with saying that now, but Tijali, I'd love to get your view, because you did talk about the sort of hit that your career took post-maternity leave, and I feel like the confidence issue is impacting lots of us in the wake of the coronavirus crisis and this return to kind of hybrid working. How can we tackle that confidence piece?
It is definitely not on us. It's the whole industry's conversation. And like Molly said, you know, everything's like you have to keep up with the times, and it changes, and they claim it changes. But the fact is, it just changes at a speed, but not so much that you can't catch up. It is just that when you keep hearing this narrative all around you that things are moving fast and you're not going to keep up and you're not going to be able to achieve what you've been doing, it's so easy for people who've been away from work to feel like they're becoming irrelevant and to feel like I'm not good enough for that job anymore, which is a shame, because you've given so many years of your life to build up those skills to be good at a career that you really love, and a short break, which is almost disproportionately smaller compared to the number of years you've spent in the industry, can just take everything away from you. It is so unfair, and it shouldn't happen. And I went back into the workforce, and I felt this was easy. Is this what I had to struggle so much for? I can still do it. I can still do it. I can do it at a good speed. I'm more efficient now that I have I have children to take care of. So it's just, let's just stop talking about this hustle culture which says that your work has to be your entire life. Your priorities can change and you can get back to it. You can always go back to what your phase is. But I also feel like the onus is also majorly on the seniors and on the industry, on the agencies, to not constantly reinforce this toxic hustle culture.
And with that hustle culture in mind, and with the gender pay gap in mind as well, right? Because sometimes we're running our own race, but then you look at the gender pay gap and you're like, okay, we're not getting to that finish line of equal pay, which then has so many different implications on lots of different things. And then the pressure of hustle culture. I mean, Sue, I'd love to get your view, because there's always that balance between compare and despair, like creating a workplace that works for you, but also just looking at the economics and going, how are we going to close this? Because it's I'm not waiting 132 years to get paid equally.
I mean, luckily for me, I'm nearly 132 already, so I'm nearly there. Yeah, it's not right, and I know the pandemic has put us back in so many ways. It's extraordinary, but I think the onus also isn't just on women. I think it's also for men. You know, if there's a child involved, then there's generally speaking another partner involved, and the onus is on that. Shouldn't be just on women to kind of take up the slack, take the emotional load. And I know COVID has very much done that, and this whole sense of a man's job could be more important because it gets paid more, but I think it's on everybody to take up, and for men and other partners to go and do school runs, share the load. It shouldn't be this kind of quite Victorian, you're a woman, you do the school drops. I really love it when when a man's like, I need to go, I'm doing the nurse. Great, I encourage that every day. Go read stories to your kids. Allow women the space to grow, because if we don't allow women the space to grow and encourage, it takes a village, and it's not on women to fill this gap, it's on everybody to fill this gap, and we can all play our part by supporting, taking up the slack, and just making it more normalised that actually it's just not on women to solve everything, because we've got enough on doing everything else. But it really is, and I think the narrative has to be around, it's not just women who should have career breaks to do the kids. Men should have career breaks. Why shouldn't everybody have career breaks? Whoever needs it, everybody needs to support, and it be more normalised and not just this gendered role that means that women can grow their careers as well.
And I think that's really interesting in the wake of the pandemic and some of the trends we're seeing around things like quiet quitting, like actually tackling some of these things that are going to close the gap will give people more space to create their best work.
Yeah, I mean, quiet quitting is really interesting, isn't it? Because you would argue that in a world, if you were creating a culture where people were valued and supported, they wouldn't need to quiet quit. I think it's a response to overburn and not being listened to. So I think, again, it's on managers to make sure that their staff are supported and heard, so they don't feel the need. I mean, I totally understand it, because if you're not being valued or heard, then you, as a human being, you have to, do something for yourself. But hopefully, we can create an environment where people can do their work, where they don't feel that's the only option.
And it's such an interesting frame to see it in as well, like the idea of people quiet quitting versus the argument that perhaps companies haven't been listening. And Tajali, I'd love to bring you in here, because obviously Anna mentioned Alan Sugar, and the sort of conversation around the future of work has been dominated by people with vested interests in office space or other things that they're really focused on. But the truth is, we do actually have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reshape the workplace for the better. What would you like to see done differently, and what would be your message to women who are perhaps reconsidering what they're doing in their career?
So I've seen this life stage, and a lot of my peers, a lot of women along with me, have decided to move to other careers, or just take a step back. And I feel their pain, and I know it's hard, and it's really sad that they have to feel it. But I would really urge people to stop and consider that just for this brief period of time when your priorities have changed, and you probably think that you're not performing at your highest, best standards or anybody else's standards. For now, until things change, just can you agree that good enough is good enough, and you don't have to be at your best at this stage? Just hang in there, go slow, and your time will come. Your time will come when you will rise to newer levels, and the results of that are not only going to be good for you, but they're going to be good for the entire industry. So just stay, go slow, but don't quit yet. Don't give up yet. It's going to change.
100% agree. 100%, it's great advice, because just do what you need to do to get by. Go small, go quiet, do what you need to do, but you're still valued. And what you're learning in doing that, you will bring forward. And when you pick up, when you're ready, but just don't quit, just hold on, because it changes, everything changes, it's all cycles. And the things you'll be learning are valuable insights to take you forward. You just need to stay there.
Sorry. And just imagine a workspace where everyone is diverse. You have people from all various, journeys of life. They understand the journeys of the people coming by and then create more supportive cultures. We may not even have to have these discussions, hopefully. But it's,
I think as women, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always be the best. You've got to be the best in the room at all times. And that's just rubbish. It's realistically just never going to happen. I think the quicker you learn that we can make mistakes and actually mistakes help us grow and all those sorts of things, like the better we'll be. We don't have to be up here all the time. Sometimes we'll be a little bit down here and sometimes here. That's just the way it works.
Like men.
it's okay.
We're going to open.
I mean, if there's two things I always say when I say no a lot more. You don't have to say yes to things, say no. If it's not going to work, say no. Hold the gaze, don't fill the gap. Just say no.
That's brilliant. Hold the gaze is awesome.
And hold the gaze. That's what I say, don't fill it in. And secondly, stop saying sorry. Don't say sorry,
It's so difficult to do, though. I've heard that
Practice
so
it.
many times.
Practice.
It just comes out.
Practice. A wonderful woman I mentor, I said to her, for this week, I want you to say no 3 times and don't say sorry. And she was so pleased. And when you get used to it, it's quite addictive. Do it. It's quite nice.
But I do think that's such a powerful point, because it's by stopping doing things that you can make the space to actually do the things that are going to progress your career. And if you're not in control of the time and your own time, you can't be in control of your career. Do we have any questions? Has anyone, not to put everyone on the spot, one just there. There we go.
I agree. I think the most important thing when you go for interviews is you're interviewing them as well. They're not just interviewing you, and it might not work for you, and that doesn't mean anything. It just means it's not right for you. It has to be a two-way thing. Yeah, exactly. 100%. And that's why you should interview them as much, because you need to be able to put that point over in order to be able to do that, because otherwise you're never going to be happy in your workspace and it's never going to be good for anybody. So just every time you go to interviews, interview them and make sure it works for you.
I also think, what is unfortunate is you saying you're lucky. Why should you have to be lucky for this? This should be a norm. This should be the way of life. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well done to you.
Yeah,
It's brilliant.
I think it's so good as well to know that that's what's possible, because I worry sometimes when we have these conversations, it's about what's not possible or the challenge, and it's so good to see that change, and the more companies hear about that, the better. Oh, of course. I can roam. Have we got another question? Oh, we've got one here.
Hi. How do you rise in your career if you say no? Because I'm quite low, I'm junior, and it's one of those things that if you do say no to opportunities, are you the no guy? Do you not want to be the yes guy, and then I shouldn't say guy, the yes person, and then that's how you get those opportunities to rise?
I think it's probably about picking your battles. Don't say no to everything. But maybe say no when it's not within your wheelhouse, or actually you've got so much on that you couldn't physically do it. Because the worst thing to do is go yes, 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 and then actually never do your job efficiently because you've got so many plates. That's not a word. Plates that you're spinning. So I think it's just being about really, really, really tactical, and don't think about what you were saying about I want to be the yes person. Think about, would other people say no? Or am I just trying to be the yes person? Would others say no? Because probably the statistics are yes. Sorry, guys in the room. Guys maybe more frequently will say no, whereas women, we want to be that person, that go-to person at all times, but sometimes it can work as a negative.
Yeah, I was told, I remember I was years and years ago at a very good agency I worked at called Lohadspink. We had this wonderful man come in, and he told us when he used to run his department, he said, I used to have half of them were yes people, half of them were the no people. And when I had to get rid of people, I always got rid of the yes people because they're easy to fill. People who can say no, know their own mind. You're not doing it to be bloody minded. And I don't suggest you do it all the time, but you've made a balanced decision. So I think what it shows is that you know your own mind, you know the opportunity, you know if it's going to work, because I think it's all about finding this sense of yourself, what works for you. And you don't have to say yes all the time. And sometimes, actually, you can say no for very, and explain it in a way that people haven't thought. You can bring a really valid point of view to the table by explaining why it is it's not going to work that other people. So you show your kind of who you are and the way your brain works around certain things. So I'm not saying, literally like, do this brief. No, is going to work for you, but you can explain, exactly in other ways why some things, and what you're doing by doing that is you're giving a point of view. And at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10 in creative, is your point of view that you bring, your curiosity, your understanding, your point of view that teaches people and shows who you are. So it's really valuable. And if you just say yes all the time, people don't always get to that place.
As an example, I remember earlier in my career, someone asked me to do a spreadsheet. I'm creative. I can't do spreadsheets. Don't like numbers. And it took me 2 days. I was like, why am I doing this? And I didn't gain anything from it. They just gained a delay. And then I turn around when anyone asks me and I go, I can't do spreadsheets, but I can do this, and this is how I can support on this in a different way. So, about knowing your...
Yeah, but I would have said no. That would have been a hard no.
Well, also going back to Molly's point of choosing your battles, right? If you have your eyes on the prize, you would know what battle to pick, and whatever, whatever uses more of your mind space to do extracurriculars can take a back seat for now, because you want to grow. Very clearly, you have your eyes at growth. So stick to what takes you ahead faster and say yes to only those.
It's such a great question. I'm not going to say no to the lovely ladies that are giving me the sign that we've only got 5 minutes. I'm not going to say no, I'm just going to ignore you.
Back to a question.
Last question, and then...
Thanks. So the journalist, I think she's Natasha Walter, wrote a book called Living Doll, where quite a few years ago, she examined sort of trend of women achieving, higher pay, more senior levels, and then actually it looked like it was falling again. Women were achieving less, and she analysed that was concomitant with the rise of sort of hypersexualisation and image the sort of social media image culture and the tyranny of how we have to look. And I wondered, what do you think is holding women back? Why are we still having these conversations? Why, when we've had so many moments of sort of women's liberation, that have then things have gone back again,
I think it's to do with allyship. It's not just on the women. I think someone mentioned this earlier. It's always been on us to do X, Y, Z. It's a shared battle. We should all be on the same page, and realizing that actually, equality means that you're going to have everyone inputting in different ways, and actually we want to value different experiences, different point of views, different backgrounds. So I think it's just down to, maybe it's been a battle that women have been fighting when it should be everyone, which is so great to see lots of men and women in the room, because it feels like we're maybe making a small step here. Does that answer your question? Kind of. Not really.
Yeah, are you also talking about the way as women age, they feel like they're less relevant?
Moments of great emancipation, and then nothing changes.
I know, I know it's really boring. I understand that. It is really boring. There are moments. But I also think sometimes we acquiesce too quickly. I think we need to just basically, excuse, I'm going to do it, fuck them all, and just keep on keeping on and not care. And I think sometimes we can care too much. No one will be as hard on us as we are on ourselves sometimes, and I think we sometimes listen to the inner critic too much, and that needs to get in the bin because it's not helpful. And actually, some days when you don't want to do it, if you keep on trying to do it, I mean, it might be awful, it might be good, but you'll learn something from it. And I think, you know, if you don't listen to whoever they is, don't know what they're talking about. And I think it's just somehow has to come within you somewhere. Because I know I get talked about, because obviously I'm old as well as being a woman. And wise, that's right. But I don't care, because that's your problem, not mine. I don't, you know, like how you want to perceive me is on you, not on me. You know what I mean? And if I let those voices in, you have to almost like, I think to get through, you have to give yourself a little insulation and let it go off, because if you let them in, then they'll start God, I sound like I'm going a bit mad here. But you know, you just have to keep doing you while it feels good, because I know I've not even started yet. I mean, you know, I'm like a 34-year overnight success. I've got a lot to do. So I'm not going to listen to anyone else. And I think you have to use some kind of resilience, some kind of, get your tribe around you, people that hold you up, you know, because there's a lot of people who detract, people who think you can't do it, but do it in spite of them. They will push you. I know I was at Colette de Courcy at her Cannes speech said, the tormentors, the people that push you, thank you, because you've taught me where I need to go. Don't listen to them, use them to push against them. So I think by sort of just keep trying to pull in through together with your tribe, you can move through it, is what I'd say.
Thank you very much. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. We have had so many great points. I'm definitely saying no to 3 things this week.
Just say no.
With no explanation.
Don't fill the gap.
There's going to be no gap and no sorry.
Yeah.
But there is going to be a big thank you to this incredible panel who have just brought so many different points of view, and it's been a really great discussion, and thank you for coming. We've got a quick video as well from Anna, who just has some takeaways and practical points, which we're just going to share, but there'll also be, hopefully the full interview will be available with Anna as well, so just a big thank you to the panel. Thank you.
More than personal experience or advice really tied to any kind of research, but I think it's probably the most human case study in this situation. Obviously, you know, not everyone's a manager, but I'm hoping anyone listening here you know, has access to a manager, has access to HR to give feedback. And I think it was a guy, he was the chief people officer at Coutts Bank, which is a traditionally quite sort of white collar industry. And you would think very sort of emasculating to consider any kind of flexibility. And that was historically how it was. But he decided to give flexibility to his 40-strong team. And I say give, you know, it's not like a little bonus ball or a nice to have, but obviously within the context and the reality of most working places, it's still a work in progress. However much people are putting the press releases out about their new flexible working policies, there's still a lot of work to be done. And all he did was gave his team 10 minutes each, and he looked in their faces, in their eyes, and just said, what is the rub in your day? You know, what's the stuff that really stresses you out? And it was different for every single person. And it ranged from, I'm so stressed I can't pick up my children at 3:15. Like, I hate them being in after school clubs 5 days a week. Just 2 days a week would change my life, that I could then log on later. Fine, do that. Next person. Okay, I get really anxious on the tube to commute into work at like 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock's a much better start time for me, and I'm happy to stay a bit later, or however you want to work. Somebody said, to be honest, just working from home for me, like to be able to cuddle my kids at bedtime, like that's all I want. And these really human stories of your employees. And he said, most people just got quite, I get quite emotional thinking about it, because it's business, right? But these are the people running your business. So if they are disengaged, discontented, unhappy, disconnected from their environment, how are you going to get the best out of them? And so all he did was ask that question, and in return, what happened in that department was productivity went up 30% in 3 months. 30%. And he got called in. He was described initially as going rogue. And that's how it's seen, isn't it? Somebody who shifts things in the way that we're used to having them, especially in an environment like that, is seen as going rogue. And I think my advice to anyone listening right now is go rogue, is to lead with that eccentric example of emotional intelligence. Be intelligent about this. Stop being a cog in a hulking great 9-to-5 machine. Break out of it for the good of your business. Take risks in that sense. Suggest to your manager other ways of working. There's so much out there. Like I said, Working Families, Pregnant Then Screwed, Fawcett Society, Trades Union Congress, TimeWise has case studies ready to go to email your HR department. This is how it could be. And I think it's accountability, really, each and every one of us taking a little glimmer of hope from that example, where going rogue really does pay off for both employee and employer.
Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure. And anyone wants to know any more, you can just go to my Instagram at mother_pucker, but also there's a flex tab on our website, motherpucker.co.uk. And there you can get all of our latest reports. Flex Forever, which is our Flex Beyond the Pandemic report. This is the stuff to send to your HR departments. This is the tangible research information you can literally forward on and go, have you seen this?
Thanks, everyone.